Now, when working on bikes, applying the proper torque is incredibly important. If you apply too little torque, you risk your component slipping. If you apply too much torque, you risk breaking your component, especially on sort of high-end carbon fiber stuff, throwing away your hard-earned money. And so using a torque wrench will allow you to apply the proper torque without allowing your component to either slip or to break. Torque wrenches are not a bike-specific tool. However, there are some bike-specific torque wrenches which were designed with the task in mind. While you are going to be paying a little bit of a premium, given the fact that these are more of a niche product, you are going to be getting some features that set them apart from more basic or general use torque wrenches. While it's better to have any torque wrench than no torque wrench, some higher end torque wrenches can last you a very, very long time and will ensure that all the components on your bike, especially those expensive carbon fiber ones, are properly torqued down to spec. So today I've assembled a who's who of bike torque wrenches. We're gonna try to figure out which one should you buy. We'll be comparing some torque wrenches on the budget range under $20, as well as one that's close to $300 to figure out where you should spend your hard-earned cash. Now, the torque wrenches in today's test are all in the 2-ish to 16 to 20-ish Newton meter range. The vast majority of fasteners on a bike will be torqued at 15 to 60 Newton meters or less, and really most of them at 10 Newton meters or less, especially for the ones that require really, really precise torque. Now, there are some components like pedals, bottom brackets, and cranks, which do require higher torque specs in the 30 to 40 Newton meter range, but something that high is probably going to require a separate torque wrench, one that has a much wider and higher scale. So these are really meant for that sort of lower torque application. We're talking about your stems, your handlebars, your seat posts, your saddle rails, stuff like that. All right, so let's meet all of our contenders, starting from the least expensive and working our way up to the most expensive torque wrench in the test. All right, so first up we have the Pittsburgh Pro 1/4-inch drive torque wrench found at Harbor Freight. The Pittsburgh Pro costs $18.99, although it can often be found for about $11.99 with a coupon. The Pittsburgh has a range of 2.2 to about 22 Newton meters. However, it doesn't have a dedicated Newton meter scale. You have to convert from inch pounds. You adjust the torque setting by loosening the bolt at the bottom, twisting the knurled handle, and then locking in the desired torque once it lines up with the markings on the handle. It is 31.5 centimeters long, and it weighs 710 grams. The Pittsburgh Pro comes in a hard plastic storage case, and it is made in Taiwan. The Amazon Basics 1/4-inch drive torque wrench recently caught my eye, as I'd never seen it before on the website, and so I purchased it to see whether it was a good option. The Amazon Basics costs $31.50. The range is 2.5 to 15 Newton meters, but it also has an inch pounds conversion on the other side. To set the torque, you pull down on the release tab, twist the knurled part of the handle, line up the line with the desired spec, and then release the locking tab. It weighs 387.2 grams and is 26.5 centimeters long. The Amazon Basics comes with a hard plastic storage case and is made in China. The Vibrelli torque wrench has over 3,000 reviews on Amazon and retails for $49.99. It has a range of 2 to 20 Newton meters and weighs 262.7 grams. The Vibrelli is 22.5 centimeters long and comes with a hard plastic storage case, as well as an assortment of hex and Torx bits that are also included in the price. The Vibrelli is made in Taiwan. Now, the Park Tool torque wrench has often been considered the gold standard in bike-specific torque wrenches, but does it live up to the hype? The Park Tool costs $90.95, and it is the only wrench in the test that comes with a 3/8 drive rather than a 1/4-inch drive. The range is 2 to 14 Newton meters, it is 23 centimeters long, and it weighs 281.3 grams. To set the desired torque, you push on the release knob at the bottom of the handle, twist the handle until the red line matches your desired torque spec, and then let go of the release knob. The Park Tool comes with a hard plastic storage case and is made in Taiwan. The Toe Peak torque stick comes in two different sizes. There is a Pro model with a range of 4 to 20 Newton meters, as well as this Nano model with a range of 2 to 10 Newton meters. To adjust the toe peak, you push up on the little knob at the bottom of the handle, line up the green line with your desired torque spec, and then release. The torque selector has a marking on the back side for a half Newton meter increment. The Nano is currently selling for $98.50, although the MSRP is listed at $119.99. The Nano comes with a storage pen that includes 5 different bits, but no storage case. The Nano weighs 127.4 grams, is 15 centimeters long, and is made in Taiwan. The Feedback Sports Range torque wrench has been getting a lot of attention recently as one of the best entries into the torque wrench market, and a lot of people claim that it's actually a better option than the tried and true Park tool. But will it stand up to the test? The Feedback costs $120, has a range of 2 to 14 Newton meters, is 14.5 centimeters long, and weighs 148.8 grams. To set the torque on the Feedback, you twist the silver part of the handle until the silver marker in the window matches up with the desired torque spec. One side of the wrench shows odd torque specs, while as the other side has the even numbers. It comes with 10 standard length bits and 3 extended bits inside a roll-up tool wrap. The Feedback is made in Taiwan. This little guy is the Effetto Mariposa 1-8 Giusta Forza. This little torque wrench is meant for getting into tight to reach spaces, and it is the only torque wrench on our list that does not have a ratcheting head. So the Giusta Forza 1-8 weighs 134.3 grams, is 14.5 centimeters long, and has a range of 1 to 8 Newton meters. To set the torque, you twist the metal dial at the bottom of the wrench until the white line is centered on the desired torque value. The Giusta Forza can either be purchased on its own or in a deluxe package that includes a tool wrap as well as S2 tool steel bits. The Giusta Forza costs $193 for just the wrench, or $237 with the wrap and bits included. The Giusta Forza is made in Italy. And finally, coming in at a whopping $297 for just the wrench, or $340 for the wrench with the tool wrap and bits included, we have the Effetto Mariposa Giusta Forza 2-16 Pro. Unlike the Giusta Forza 1-8, the Pro version does have a ratcheting head, and it also takes traditional 1/4-inch sockets rather than having a hex insert for the head. The 2-16 is also available in a non-Pro version, which has a fixed head like the 1-8, rather than the ratcheting one found on the Pro version. It costs $237 for just the wrench. The Pro has a range of 2 to 16 Newton meters, and you set the torque by twisting the metal dial at the bottom until the white line is centered on your desired torque spec. The Pro version weighs 192.1 grams and is 17.5 centimeters long. The 2-16 and 2-16 Pro are both made in Italy. Now, if you're looking for a lightweight torque wrench, your 3 best options would be the Toe Peak, the Giusta Forza 1-8, as well as the Feedback Sports. The Pittsburgh is by far the heaviest, coming in at 710 grams, followed by the Amazon Basics at 387.2 grams. If you want a compact torque wrench, the 3 shortest are, again, the Giusta Forza 1-8, the Toe Peak Torque Stick Nano, and the Feedback Sports Range. The 2 longest wrenches would be, again, the Pittsburgh Pro and the Amazon Basics. Now, a torque wrench is really only useful if it's actually accurate. So in order to test out how accurate these different torque wrenches are, I bought this little digital torque adapter that takes a 1/4-inch bit. To be fair, this was about $40, whereas most professional torque testers are at least $400. I wasn't ready to splash that much money on something I'm gonna use once. I think this will work well enough, at least to figure out relative accuracy relative to one another. Although to be fair to the manufacturers, this is nowhere near as accurate as the machinery they use to actually calibrate these things. Now, if this reads significantly higher than what the manufacturer claims, I would probably blame it on this rather than the manufacturer. With a large enough sample size and controlling for outliers, we should be able to get some good, useful information from this. So each torque wrench will be tested 30 times at 3 different torque settings: 3 Newton meters, 5 Newton meters, and then 10 Newton meters, except for the Giusta Forza 1-8, which only goes up to 8, so we'll test that one at its max setting of 8 Newton meters. With this relatively large sample size of 30 clicks per setting, and as well as controlling for outliers, we should be able to get some usable data to determine which of these torque wrenches is the most accurate. We're going to start off with 3 Newton meters, which is a rather low torque setting. This is something you might find on some high-end carbon bars, carbon seat post, or maybe a carbon saddle rail. These lower settings can be rather challenging for torque wrenches, as a lot of them really are most comfortable in the sort of middle of their range. And in fact, the ISO standard for testing torque wrenches basically says that for all ranges above 5 Newton meters, 4% accuracy is considered good, but below 5 Newton meters, they say up to 6% accuracy is considered acceptable. So clearly, it is harder to get a good reading at a lower torque spec. So let's see whether or not these torque wrenches can handle 3 Newton meters reliably. The Pittsburgh Pro struggles at 3 Newton meters. It averaged 3.5 Newton meters over 30 clicks with a standard deviation of 0.59. On average, its clicks were 21.3% away from the 3 Newton meter setting. The Amazon Basics also struggled at this lower setting, averaging 3.76 Newton meters with a standard deviation of 0.75. The clicks were on average 29.7% away from 3 Newton meters. The Vibrelli was a bit below average at 3 Newton meters, 3.45 Newton meters average for the Vibrelli, 0.36 standard deviation, and 16.3% average error. The Park tool is where we start to see some more consistent accuracy. 3.23 Newton meters average with a standard deviation of 0.37 and an average error of 11.2%. The toe peak torque stick punched well above its weight at 3 Newton meters, 3.16 average, 0.35 standard deviation, and an average error of 9.67%. The Feedback Pro is considered to be one of the best torque wrenches for the price, but will it stand up to the test at 3 Newton meters? Well, 3.19 Newton meters average, 0.27 standard deviation, and an average error of 9.22%. The Giusta Forza 1-8 was intended for low torque applications, but can it really beat the rest of the wrenches? 2.98 Newton meters average, standard deviation of 0.26, average error of 7.33%, very impressive indeed. The Giusta Forza 2-16 has a wider range than the Giusta Forza 1-8, but will it be able to match it on low torque? For the Giusta Forza Pro, 3.2 Newton meters average with a standard deviation of 0.33 and an average error of 10.56%. So at 3 Newton meters, the Giusta Forza 1-8 took the gold medal with the lowest average error across its 30 clicks. In silver, we had the Feedback, and taking home the bronze was the toe peak. The Amazon Basics and the Pittsburgh Pro struggled in this test, partially because of their wider range, but also because of their lack of a truly accurate Newton meter scale, which makes it difficult to actually set these at exactly 3 Newton meters because you have to convert over from inch pounds, and it's unclear how accurate these are at these really low torque specs. So it seems that the more compact torque wrenches take the cake when it comes to low torque applications. Next, let's test the wrenches at 5 Newton meters, which is a torque spec you might find on a seat post collar or on some stem bolts. The Pittsburgh Pro did better at 5 Newton meters, The Pittsburgh Pro did much better at 5 Newton meters compared to its performance at 3 Newton meters, 5.2 Newton meter average, 0.41 standard deviation, and 7.2% error. The Amazon Basics did slightly better than the Harbor Freight, averaging 5.09 Newton meters with a standard deviation of 0.39 and 6.6% average error. The Vibrelli also improved at 5 Newton meters, 5.06 Newton meter average, 0.42 standard deviation, and 6.67% error. The Park tool continues to be solid, 4.90 Newton meter average, 0.42 standard deviation, and 6.87% error. The toe peak torque stick had a smaller standard deviation than the Park tool, but it was consistently a bit short of 5 Newton meters. 4.63 Newton meter average, 0.37 standard deviation, and 8.33% error. And the Feedback Pro continues to impress, 4.82 average, 0.29 standard deviation, and only 4.33% average error. The Giusta Forza took the win at 3 Newton meters, but it will have to settle for the bronze at 5 Newton meters. 4.78 Newton meter average, 0.29 standard deviation, 6.13% error. And the Giusta Forza Pro 2 to 16 is much more comfortable at 5 Newton meters than 3 Newton meters, taking home the silver. 5 on the dot average, 0.35 standard deviation, 5.87% error. Now at 5 Newton meters, we saw some more consistent results across all of the torque wrenches. This is mostly due to the fact that 5 Newton meters tends to be kind of in the middle of the range for most of these wrenches, which is where they're most comfortable. And this is actually really good news for us because the vast majority of torque specs on a bike are between 4 and about 6 Newton meters, putting this range kind of where you want to be. Now at 5 Newton meters, the Feedback Sports took home the gold, followed in second by the Giusta Forza Pro, and in third by the Giusta Forza 1 to 8. Just to show how close these results were, the toe peak was actually in last place in this test, but it only had an average error of about 8%. And so all of the wrenches did well at this 5 Newton meter range. Finally, let's test the torque wrenches at about 10 Newton meters, which is a little bit on the higher end. You're gonna see this more for like derailleur mounts and stuff like that, but this will give us a chance to test out the torque wrenches at the higher end of their range, which tends to be a little bit more difficult. Now, the Giusta Forza doesn't go up to 10, it maxes out at 8, so we're gonna test it out at 8, while the rest will be tested out at 10. While this isn't exactly an apples to apples comparison, again, being at the very top of your range is pretty difficult, so if the Giusta Forza does well at 8, we can probably assume that it would have done well at 10 if it did go up to 10. The Pittsburgh Pro lacks a dedicated Newton meter scale on the wrench, forcing you to convert from inch pounds to Newton meters. This may have been the issue because the Pittsburgh Pro was consistently short of 10 Newton meters, only coming out to 8.3 Newton meters on average because of the consistently low torque it reached, 16.87 average error. The Amazon Basics was also recording a bit low, 9.27 Newton meters average, with a standard deviation of 0.68 and an 11.7% average error. The Vibrelli came into its own at 10 Newton meters, 10.27 Newton meter average, 1.14 standard deviation, 9.27 average percent of error. The Park Tool also recorded a bit low, 8.97 Newton meters on average, 1.0 standard deviation, 11.97 average error. The Toe Peak Torque Stick had a smaller standard deviation than the Park Tool, but was also consistently a bit short of 10 Newton meters, 9.05 Newton meters on average, 0.66 standard deviation, 9.87% average error, although this is the max torque for the Toe Peak. The Feedback Pro was also a bit short of 10 Newton meters on average, but it could be used to the fact that aligning the gauge is a little bit tricky. 8.86 Newton meters average, 0.47 standard deviation, 11.33% average error. Now the Giusta Forza can't go to 10 Newton meters, but how will it fare at its max setting of 8 Newton meters? 7.72 Newton meters on average, 0.47 standard deviation, 5.67% average error, not bad at all. At 10 Newton meters, the Giusta Forza Pro is closer to the middle of its range rather than the top. Will that help it do well? 9.5 Newton meters average, 0.62 standard deviation, 6.1 average error. Now, if we include the Giusta Forza 1 to 8 at 8 Newton meters, that was actually the most accurate in this test. However, if we remove that, since it wasn't 10 Newton meters, we have the Giusta Forza Pro first, the Vibrelli second, and the Toe Peak third. Now, if we compare the performance across all three tests, the Giusta Forza 1 to 8 takes home the gold with an average error of 6.38%, followed in second by the Giusta Forza Pro at 7.51%, and the Feedback Sports in third at 8.30%. The Amazon Basics takes home last place at 16.03% average error. However, this is mostly because of its poor performance at the 3 Newton meter level. Now, if low torque performance is of utmost performance to you, then the Giusta Forza Pro 1 to 8 is really the best option. However, the Feedback Sports at $120 is quite a bit cheaper, and it did very well across the board at all the different accuracies, also at the lower ones. Now, if you don't really need to go down to 3 Newton meters or below all that often, then the Vibrelli actually did pretty well, especially given the price. Now, all of these torque wrenches are what's called a click type torque wrench, which basically means that once you reach the desired torque spec, it emits an audible click that lets you know, hey, you're at the right torque spec, stop applying torque. Now, most of us work in quiet garages such as this, and so you should be able to hear even quieter clicks. However, if you work in a noisier setting, maybe something like a bike shop, being able to discern when the torque wrench is at its desired torque is really important, and an audible click is very helpful in that, especially when dealing with expensive, lightweight carbon fiber components. So we're gonna test the average volume of the click of these different torque wrenches using a decibel meter app on my phone. Again, probably not the most high-tech device in the world, but it should give us, again, some relative information. Each torque wrench will be clicked between 5 and 10 times until I see a sort of obvious pattern of average decibels, and then we'll record sort of the range and take an average of that. First up, we have the Harbor Freight, which averaged 74 decibels across the various clicks. The Amazon Basics was a little bit quieter at 72 decibels. The Vibrelli is nice and loud, 77 decibels on average. The Park Tool is rather quiet and pretty much lacks an audible click altogether, 68 decibels on average. The Toe Peak is on the quieter side, 72 decibels. The Feedback Sports comes in around the middle of the pack, 73 decibels. If you want a loud click on your torque wrench, the Giusta Forza 1-8 might be your best bet, 80 decibels. Does the ratcheting function of the Giusta Forza Pro make it quieter than the fixed head? It's very much possible, 73 decibels average. Quick note here about decibels. Decibels are not a sort of linear measurement or a one-to-one measurement. So for example, 60 decibels versus 70 decibels. 70 decibels is not 16% louder than 60 decibels. It's actually twice as loud. 60 decibels is about the sound of an average conversation like this, or maybe a dishwasher, whereas 80 decibels is about the sound of an alarm clock. Now, with that understanding, the 68 decibel reading from the Park Tool is really rather disappointing in my opinion. I bought mine new about 3 years ago, and it never actually made a click even when I had it new at any torque setting. There are other reviewers who have said that it did make a click and then it stopped making a click, and some of them even sent it back to Park Tool, and the Park Tool said, no, this is normal, it's fine. In my opinion, it's not really fine for a $90 torque wrench, in my opinion, right? Now, does it prevent the torque wrench from being accurate? No. And it does sort of do a little bit of like a cam out, sort of like a pivot of the head. And so you can feel it hitting the torque spec, but without the click, it's kind of hard to call it a click type torque wrench. That makes it a little bit harder to recommend the Park Tool. Again, for some people, it might not be a big deal, but it is kind of frustrating that a click type torque wrench that costs $90 doesn't actually click. If you want to ensure you have a loud click, then your best bet would be the Vibrelli at 77 decibels or the Giusta Forza 1-8 at a very loud 80 decibels. Many of the bolts you're going to want to torque down on a bike can be in hard to reach places. And so having a thin or narrow head on a torque wrench might be helpful in allowing you to actually apply the proper torque to these hard to reach bolts. So my seat post here, the Woodman Carbo EL that I have on my highball, it has a really kind of frustrating bolt here at the front to adjust the saddle angle, because not only is it, in a tight to reach area, there's not a lot of space here, the post also goes in one direction, it kind of goes like this, while the bolt goes like this, which makes it really hard to properly torque this down. So let's see which of these torque wrenches can actually complete this task. So if you need to torque down a really hard to reach bolt like the one on my seat post, well, the Giusta Forza 1-8 really is the best tool for the job. The sort of flat kind of cutout on the top of the head allows it to get in some really tight spaces, and it's also really accurate at these low torque settings, making it great for this sort of application. If you want a ratcheting head, the toe peak does have a ratcheting head in a very small body, and it was the only other wrench that was able to actually torque down the seat post bolt, although with a little bit more fiddling than the Giusta Forza. Now the Feedback Sports probably could have torqued this bolt down all the way, but it felt a little sketchy. It felt to me like it was about to cam out, potentially stripping out my bolt, which is titanium, so it's a little bit softer, so I didn't push my luck. If you want to go for a cheaper option, the Vibrelli also has a nice and small head and should be able to get into most spaces, although it couldn't complete this particular test. So which torque wrench is actually the best? Well, let's look at sort of two different ways to approach this question. First, I sort of made a scoring chart, if you will, in which I'll use both objective and subjective measures to score the various torque wrenches, and we'll see which one comes out on top. After we do that, I'm gonna give you just my sort of honest, personal, subjective opinion of which one is best for which person. And if you want a slightly more in-detail comparison or sort of head-to-head of a few of these torque wrenches, I will be making a few other videos. I'll be comparing the budget torque wrenches, those first three. I'll be comparing those mid-range torque wrenches, and then I'll be comparing the sort of top-end ones to the mid-range to see whether it's worth your extra money. Without further ado, let's get into the scoring. Now, for the objective scores, the Giusta Forza, Feedback, Toe Peak, and Giusta Forza Pro all performed well with the accuracy test. Now, while the Giusta Forza 1-8 and the Feedback were slightly ahead of the pack, all of these wrenches are capable of reliably torquing to the proper spec, and the small variation may have been caused by my budget testing equipment. Now, when considering total range, all of the wrenches are capable of hitting the proper torque specification on basically every single bicycle bolt that is not a bottom bracket, pedal, or crank bolt. However, the Toe Peak and Giusta Forza regular were dinged a bit for maxing out at 10 and 8 Newton meters respectively. Now, weight might not be a huge factor for a tool that primarily lives on the workbench, but a lightweight tool is easier to use, and there are some people who are looking to carry a torque wrench during their rides. The Feedback, Giusta Forza, and Toe Peak all scored max points in the weight category. Click volume can be very important when working in noisy environments. The Giusta Forza has by far the loudest click at 80 decibels, followed by the Vibrelli at 77. The rest were all satisfactorily loud, however, the Park tool was disappointingly quiet. Finally, the only wrenches that were actually able to complete the hard-to-reach bolt test were the Giusta Forza and the Toe Peak. The Feedback Sports was pretty close, so it received a partial point, but it wasn't actually able to torque it all the way down. Now, onto the subjective categories. For build quality, I gave the highest points to both the Giusta Forzas, the Toe Peak, and the Feedback. All of these torque wrenches really feel like premium products. They have all metal construction. They feel really good. The Park tool is a premium product. It does feel good, but I did ding it a little bit for the plastic handle, which feels a little bit cheap. Now, the subjective ease of use category went to the Toe Peak, the two Giusta Forzas, and the Vibrelli. All of these torque wrenches were really intuitive to use. It was easy to set the dial to the correct torque spec. You knew exactly what the torque spec was, and they were just easy to use. The Feedback was dinged a little bit because it's kind of hard to tell exactly what torque spec you're actually at, given the fact that you're essentially moving the entire silver section, and it's not really clear whether you're lining it up with the top of the silver section, like underneath the line, or right at the line, so it's a little bit unclear where it is you actually need to put the line to. Also, Feedback Sports does say that you need to apply pressure to just the little silver portion at the end in order to get a proper torque spec, and it's pretty stubby, making it kind of difficult to get to, especially if you have larger hands. The Park tool was dinged a bit because, first of all, it has a 3/8 inch drive head, which really just doesn't make sense on a small torque wrench meant for mostly 1/4 inch drive socket, so you're going to have to use an adapter most of the time. Now, Park tool does sell their own sockets, which are 3/8 inch. However, it really should be a 1/4 inch. And the Park tool doesn't have full integers between the torque settings on the dial. So it shows even numbers, 2, 4, 6, whatever. But if you want to hit 3, there is no 1 on the bottom dial. So you have to go between 0.8 and 1.2, which again, you can find, but it's just not quite as intuitive as some of the other ones. Now, using this scoring system here, in which I assigned different point values to different categories, again, accuracy was the most important, so I gave that the most points, followed by the other categories. The Juice to Forza 1 to 8 came out on top, narrowly beating out the Feedback Sports and the Toe Peak Torque Stick, which tied for second place. What's my recommendation for who should buy which torque wrench? Well, in the budget category, I would actually recommend the Harbor Freight. Now, this might be a little bit surprising given the fact that it's sort of ranked at the bottom of most of the tests, but the reality is that for, $12, which is the usual price you can find it on sale for, this really is all you need. It is gonna lack some of the features of the more expensive torque wrenches, but if you're someone who just needs to, every once in a while, torque down a bolt, or just wants to make sure that your seat posts and your stem bolts are at the proper torque spec, $12, I mean, hey, I've had mine for 8 years. It's still relatively accurate. It's got a nice case. It's got a better case than the Amazon Basics, actually. It's a good buy, $12. The Amazon Basics at about $31, $32, really, almost triple the price of the Harbor Freight, just isn't worth it. The fit and finish is not appreciably better. Yeah, it is lighter and it's a little bit shorter, but it's not a compact torque wrench by any stretch of the imagination. The little adjustment dial, like I said, is annoying. It doesn't spring back like it's supposed to. And it just doesn't feel like it's worth the money. I think Amazon Basics really just went to like the lowest bidder, had them build the torque wrench. It doesn't even fit in the case properly because I think that case was meant for like the different sizes in the Amazon Basics range, so it fits the 1/4 inch and the 3/8 inch. So you can really see they were trying to cut corners, but they sort of cut corners without really cutting the price down to the same level as the Harbor Freight. So Harbor Freight, Amazon Basics, Harbor Freight, all day. Now, the Vibrelli is an interesting option. $50 is maybe not really in the budget range. I'll include it in this category because you do get the entire socket set with the Torx bits included too, which is a nice little value added. The Vibrelli definitely is nicer to use than both the Harbor Freight and the Amazon Basics, but again, $50, you're looking at quite a bit more investment. And if you go up from 50 to like 70, there's some other interesting options at that price range, which are probably better than the Vibrelli. So it's kind of in a weird sort of spot. I think if the Vibrelli were like $40, it would probably take the win in this category. But at 50, it's a little harder to give it the win. I do think if you have $50 to spend, but you don't want to spend more than that, I would probably go with the Vibrelli over the Harbor Freight. But I think if you are just a casual user that just needs to torque down a few things every once in a while, the Harbor Freight is your best bet in the budget category. Now, what about the best value torque wrench? What's the best for your money? Now, I think that has to go to the Feedback Sports. At $120, it really is a really, really good torque wrench. It was near the top of all the tests. It's got a really nice build quality, great fit and finish, super accurate. It's just a great torque wrench. I really, I think it's dethroned the Park Tool. I have to say it. Bike Sauce, one of my favorite YouTube channels, he said it. I'm gonna echo that statement. I think the Feedback Sports is a better torque wrench than the Park Tool. There are a few minor nitpicks I have to make with the Feedback Sports, just to be fair. First of all, the tool wrap is not my favorite. I would have preferred a hard plastic case. Torque wrenches are pretty delicate tools. You don't want to be banging them around. And so a hard plastic case really is, or a metal case even, is just a better option than a soft tool wrap, in my opinion. In addition to that, the adjustment on the Feedback Sports, as I said before, is a little bit tricky because it's hard to understand exactly where you're supposed to put that little silver line, whether it's like right below the number or right above the number or in the middle. So it can be a little tricky to set, although it is easy to set, I have to say. Like actually turning the dial is very easy. And the fact that it has an open spring worries me maybe a little bit if you're working in maybe like a really dirty or dusty environment because most torque wrenches have the spring completely enclosed. So that is something that might worry me in the future, but this is a pretty minor nitpick. All that being said, it is a great wrench. Like I said, it is a great wrench. It's accurate, it's got a loud click, pleasure to use. I really do like the Feedback Sports. It is my best buy, I would say. I do think it's a better option than the Park Tool. At $90, the Park Tool, you're gonna need to buy sockets to go along with it, right? And again, you're looking at least $15-ish. Now you're pushing at about $105 for the Park Tool plus some sockets. and you need a 3/8 to 1/4 inch adapter, so that's another at least $5 or something. So they're a little bit closer in price once you consider the fact that the feedback comes with bits included. So if you don't have anything whatsoever, the feedback has everything you need to get started and use it right away. However, one thing I do have to mention that might give the Park Tool the edge, especially for professional or bike shop use, is that feedback does not offer calibration services for the range torque wrench. So if you drop it, if it, someone drives over it, if it goes out of calibration for whatever reason, you're kind of SOL. You're probably just buying a new one. I don't know if you can service it yourself and calibrate it yourself. I would imagine not, or at least feedback won't tell you how to do it. Whereas the Park Tool does offer calibration services for their torque wrenches. So that's probably why the Park Tool has been sort of the industry staple, because it also offers, service, right? And if you're in a bike shop, they say, 5,000 clicks before calibration. You'll go through 5,000 clicks probably within a year, if not maybe sooner. I mean, depending on how much you're using it, if you do warm-up clicks, which a lot of torque wrenches say you should do. So the Park Tool might have the edge there. However, I do think for the home use, the Feedback Sports really is the best buy. That leaves us with, what is the best of the best? What is the best torque wrench you can buy, at least in this test? Now, to be fair, there are a few torque wrenches that are, super high-end, premium, like the Wera and stuff like that weren't included in this test, so keep that in mind. I have to say, the Giusta Forzas are really, really nice. I mean, you do get what you pay for. They are a step above the rest in terms of build quality, fit and finish. I mean, if they feel like tools that you can keep for a lifetime and you can pass down to someone, like heirloom quality tools. They really do have that feel, and I am being honest about that. They feel really rather incredible. Both the Giusta Forzas are my personal tools, and I've used them now for over a year, and I absolutely love them. Are they worth the price? That's a different question, right? The Giusta Forza, the regular, the 1-8, at $197, it's expensive, especially when it doesn't come with any bits, although you can use standard bits, so you buy just a decent set of bits for 10, 15 bucks. You're not looking at much more than $200. I still think the feedback is probably a better buy than that, although the Giusta Forza does have the advantage on those really sort of tight applications. The Giusta Forza Pro at $300 for just the wrench, you've got to justify that yourself. It's hard to justify, especially when it's kind of less usable than the 1-8, given the fact that it has the bigger head. It does have the ratcheting feature, which is nice, but me personally, I don't really ratchet a torque wrench all that much. I kind of use like a hex key to get it down to close to torque, and then I just kind of get it to torque with the torque wrench. So I don't know if a ratcheting function is super important on a torque wrench. Might be a little bit of a cop-out, but what I would actually recommend for the best of the best would be the one in the middle, the one that I didn't show here, the Giusta Forza 2-16 non-pro, the one with the fixed head. The reason being is that you get to keep the sort of close quarters ability of the 1-8, but you get the full range of the 2-16. So this allows you to do any single bolt on a bike that you might need to do, and you can still access those hard to reach bolts because the fixed head is the same side. Now, that one does come in at $237, or about double the price of the Feedback Sports, and it doesn't come with any bits. The bits will set you back an additional $40 or so. But like I said, it is a really nice tool, buy once, cry once sort of thing. It's a luxury at the end of the day. The metaphor I would use is this. I think the Feedback Sports is like a Porsche. High quality, feels great, well engineered. Like a Porsche is really, really nice. If someone said, hey, do you want a Porsche? I'd say, thank you, yes, please. However, the Giusta Forzas, sorry, it's a cliche, they're Ferraris. And if we're honest, a Porsche is not a Ferrari, but a Ferrari is a Ferrari. So you want to pay Ferrari money? The Giusta Forza is the one for you. So that's it. This was a very long, very in-depth video. I hope it was helpful to someone. I hope it was useful. If there are any other torque wrenches that you feel would be interesting for me to compare to some of the existing ones in this test, let me know. Let me know down below. I will try to source them and include them in a future video. If you have any questions about any of the torque wrenches, please again, let me know down below. Any comments on the tests I did, let me know down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys later.